If you are new to Metallica, the band songwriting credits may confuse you. Lars Ulrich, the drummer, is all over the list. How is this possible, considering that he's just a drummer? Yeah. Hi friends, it's Andriy Vasilenko and welcome to Metallica Geek, where we are over-analyzing our favorite f***ing bands. Metallica songs are made of riffs, and James Hetfield writes the majority of them, and he always has. Almost always, on Kill 'Em All, the debut album, only about 60% of the riffs belong to him. The rest are Mustaines, and a few supposedly by James's former bandmate Hugh Tanner. And who was not credited for some reason? Kirk Hammett, the current lead guitarist, has a solid riff catalog too. And all the bassists, except Ron McGowney, also contributed. But the drummer seems to have created more music to Metallica than all of them combined. He is a co-writer of 113 out of 115 original Metallica tracks. Is there some sort of a catch? Yes, there is. There are two sides of the story, the light side and the dark side, and which one is dominating, who knows. That is, Lars knows.
Second version's better than the first one.
Get comfy and enjoy the discussion. As James Hetfield himself admitted, Lars has a better vision of how Metallica songs should sound like. James got riffs, Lars got vision. James gives fabric and Lars is tailor. But there's a flip side of being a riff master. Each riff is like a child. You are loving them all. And so you may need someone else to break this veil of subjectivity. Someone whose opinion you trust. Someone who would say it straight up, and who's really good at discerning gems.
See, he's still standing there smiling. Yeah.
Luckily, Metallica's got such a guy. In fact, that guy created Metallica. Famous story, Bob Rock, Metallica's producer, did not see huge potential of Enter Sandman. Lars did.
Lars knew before we recorded, just by the demos, that Sandman was the song. I didn't hear it.
And he also saw the way to turn a riff
1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1 and 1.
in the riff.
3 and then the tail.
Again, ear and vision. But how about writing actual music? Did Lars contribute riffs? Surprisingly, yes, and he did it in 2 ways. Metallica's music, especially in the early days, was a product of a duel between James and Lars. James could say, "Hey, check it out," and try to keep up with it. And that's how we got the iconic drums from one. And that could go the other way around as well. Lars showed a drum beat, and James laid a guitar lick on it. So despite the fact that Lars Ulrich could not play an actual instrument, I mean one that's good for composing, no offense to you drummers, he could, as James told, murmur riffs. Well, his mouth has always worked fine. Metallica rehearsal tapes from 1982 feature someone, supposedly Lars, mumbling riffs. Maybe that was just stuff he heard from Dave or James. In one interview, Dave Mustaine said that the harmony intro from Ride the Lightning, the song, was written by his little Danish friend. But in a different interview, we come across that Cliff did it. So it's either someone mixed up or the intro indeed has 2 authors. Lars came up with the main phrase, na 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 na, and Cliff figured out its harmony. So even though there's just a couple of notes, both got the songwriting credit for the song. While Gjermund did not, even though his solo defines the song to me. Something does not seem fair there. Each band sets its own songwriting credits policy, and Metallica is on rather authoritarian branch. Just taking part in making Metallica song may not be enough to count as its co-writer. Two albums being exceptions to that, Saint Anger and Death Magnetic. Everyone was mentioned there as author. Even Bob Rock had finally had such an honor on yet the last album he produced with Metallica, where he also played bass.
Yeah, it sounds real farty.
Although his contribution to music of Saint Anger may have been as significant as on Load Reload and the Black Album, but his name was not on the songwriting credits on those albums. So I suppose that Metallica becoming more liberal in that regard was due to them trying to maintain a sort of new life after almost having broken up. They rethought a lot of things about the band, and losing songwriting credits might have been part of therapy. And the policy continued on to Death Magnetic, Robert Trujillo's baptism in studio. His name, as well as James, Lars and Kirk, is on each track from the album. And same for Beyond Magnetic and even Lulu. Maybe that's just because the album, the songs had lots of riffs and everyone happened to contribute on every song. And Justice for All, another riff-packed album, has only 4 tracks with Kirk Hammett's name. And so Kirk, in his prime, had fewer riffs than in the mid-2000s? On the latest album, Hardwired, we have only 1 lick by Trujillo and a complete vacuum by Hammett. What had changed? In the case of Kirk, according to him, that's because he lost an iPhone with like quadrillion ideas. But what about Rob? 8 years from 2008 to 2016, and he had brought only 1 riff to Metallica's table? Even that one could be from before Death Magnetic. So in terms of riffs, Hardwired is basically a solo album of James, or for that matter, a solo album of James and Lars. Even though it's always been so, James and Lars, and on the album it just crystallized. There wasn't as much teamwork as on the previous records, and so they probably did not see it reasonable or fair to mention everyone in credits again. Which makes me believe that there was no this thing like everyone contributed to every song on Saint Anger and Death Magnetic. Perhaps on many, but not all. It was more of a Metallica are a happy family now kind of stuff. And Hardwired is yet another proof that Lars and James are essentially the f***ing band. Their creative marriage contract tells so. Or maybe there's a real contract behind it, which leads to the dark side of the story. Besides, or in addition to being good at gluing up riffs, Lars owns Metallica. Literally, the very name Metallica legally belongs to him. Legally to him and actually to Ron Quintana. From a law perspective, the band exists on the drummer's will. Even though there was a time when the guys could kick him out. Like for real. Scott Ian tells in his autobiography from the words of James himself that he, Kirk and Cliff planned to finish Master of Puppets tour and then say goodbye to Lars. I don't know the exact reasons why, but getting along and putting up with young Lars must have been a huge problem to the band. But the plans changed after Sweden. As James said and Scott remembered, we cannot lose 2 of us now. And climate within Metallica did change after that. Lars, besides drumming and songwriting assistance, also took on some management duties. And the decline in his drumming skills may be attributed to that. Jason Newsted once said that back in the 90s he once asked Lars why he wouldn't stay after rehearsal to practice with him more. On what the drummer replies something like, "Oh man, you cannot even imagine how much of other stuff is on me." So how does it relate to the songwriting credits issue? There may be an agreement or a real contract that everything that Metallica releases has to have Lars's name on it, regardless what actual contribution. And there's one guy who kinda confirmed it. A few years ago, Metallica, they were up to reissuing the old stuff, including the legendary pre-Kill 'Em All demo, No Life Till Leather. But there was a problem. Dave Mustaine. I tend to agree with Dave in that regard, based on what I know. How on earth should Lars be counted as a co-writer of, say, Jump in the Fire, since in that track, everything, down to a single note, was written by Mustaine? Jump was the first complete song that he brought to Metallica.
This is the first song that Dave showed us.
And after his departure, they did not change anything in it. They changed something in the Four Horsemen mechanics, which too could be a cheap move though, but that's a whole other mattress. So in that light, it seems weird that Motor Breath avoided such a fate to be a song by Lars too. It remains the only Metallica track from which Lars does not receive royalties. And Anesthesia, of course, but that would have been the biggest bullshit ever. Conclusion. The Danish boy barely knew drums, but he was such a go-getter, and he did have a grasp on metal. Metallica was born, and may still exist, thanks to Lars's huge enthusiasm, luck, and impudence. Be it his composing skills or his ownership on Metallica, we should appreciate that after all the decades, all the ups and downs, love and hate, he did not allow the ship of Metallica just to sink. He is the master of puppets. By the way, my wife's new painting is inspired by Metallica. Orion. Check it out on mine and hers Instagrams. And the idea came from a guy who bought one of her works. So thank you, man, for that and for this. These promotions I do in the videos seem to work. And if you want to support Metallica Geek, go to iTunes and leave a review and a 5 stars if you like it. It's easy, it's for free, and really helps to keep Metallica on this channel. Thanks for listening, it's Andriy Vasilenko, and hear you next time, friends.